Sometimes you just need to turn off the distractions, get to work, and find the universal truths that affect us all and that govern our universe. This is a good place to do that. Mark Fults and Kat Hobson will try to help with that a bit by bringing fantastic guests. Let's see what's happening tonight.
Hello, welcome to Universal Truths with Mark Fults. We are coming to you from WBHM-DB in beautiful Birmingham. And this is, of course, your host, Mark Fults, and Kate Hobson is taking care of all the electronics today. We just had Cattywampus Thursday where we started off, but then it kind of went, the electronics didn't go where we needed them to. So tonight I am going to sit and talk to you about mediumship and channeling. And that is something that I'm a 42-year metaphysical veteran, basically, and that's something that I've been involved in since I was about 18. Now I'm going on 60. So I'm going to try and put it into context for people who've heard of it but really don't know what it is. And then I will tell you little stories and stuff that go along with it. Because it's a journey. It's not just something like you go to a class, you learn to do this, you jump out there, and then all of a sudden you're a medium, or all of a sudden you're a channeler. Being a psychic doesn't necessarily mean you're a medium. Being a medium does not necessarily mean that you are a channeler. And so I'm going to try and figure out how to get this across and make it entertaining. And we'll just see what we can come up with. Because I know lots of people want to know things like this. And there have been channelers and psychics I've talked to in the years ago that they would give you this kind of nebulous idea about what they were doing, because actually they just were doing it. They didn't know how to explain it. So when I started thinking about this show, it is different. You know, there are so many things that I know intrinsically that then when you have to sit down and go, oh, how do I explain to someone what that process is for those who are interested in doing these kind of things? And so we'll kind of go into where these things come from. Channeling is something that is as old as humankind. They didn't have words for it back then. You know, it was just something they did. They channeled their gods. They channeled the spirits. They were oracles. And basically, channeling is kind of like being an oracle, because you're speaking, you're using your body to be the conduit for a spirit or energy to speak. So you're giving it a platform. Now, mediumship, to me, it is very the natural just process, because everyone that has psychic abilities built in, it's like a sense of smell. It's like everyone has it. Doesn't mean you need to use it, but everyone has it at some point or in some level. And mediumship, when you're psychic or you're even just getting intuition, that's kind of mediumship. Your device, your third eye, your hypothalamus, your pituitary gland, your cerebellum, all of it, and your neurons, they're all working in conjunction with each other to open up your, like a radio operator. You're picking up radio waves, and you may not know what to do with them. You may not know what the message is that you're getting, but you're getting them. And so when everything is in working order, that happens all the time. You get little intuitions, you pick up little omens, you get a sense like, oh, I shouldn't let my child get on that bus, that kind of thing, to where it's like animals have it that protect them from getting in trouble, because they'll smell the danger. They'll smell the energy going on. So, so it's we'll just try to start at the natural process that everyone pretty much has. And women usually have more intuition than men, because men are kind of taught out of it. And in our culture, we're not taught to believe these things, even though it's just nature. It's natural. It's, of course, as a woman, you're going to have, if you have children, you're going to have a connection to those children psychically, because they share the same DNA. They've shared the blood. They've shared everything. So it's all natural. But we're taught a lot that it's ooh, kind of spooky wooky, scary stuff that is wrong, and all that stuff. Your feelings are wrong. Your psychic abilities are wrong, because it scares people. And also, if they don't know how to control that in you, it's a threat, because that's why you don't have very many spiritualist churches around, because when spiritualism came around, people were in this church, doing exactly that. They were doing mediumship, being a psychic, developing their own sense of self and their own powerful abilities, to look beyond the skin, look beyond the flesh, and look beyond the grave. And now we're so separated from Earth, from being natural, from our ancestors, from what they were doing naturally. We're just so separated from it. We have rubber-heeled shoes. We live in houses. We don't live on the dirt. We don't live in teepees. We don't live as one with Earth. We don't live as one connected to the animals. Even people tribes that would kill animals to eat them, paid respect to them, because they knew somewhere we are connected to these animals. We are connected to the Earth. We are connected to the self-regulatory system of the universe, because the Earth is a self-regulatory system. And we are included in on that self-regulatory system. And when we die, we have a self-regulatory thing that happens with our energies, with our spirit delivery systems. So, but all of the religions and all the things like that have separated us from that. And it's become, you have to go to a middleman to even think of speaking to God or to Goddess or to your spirit. And if you tend to be a spirit talker or to get messages or that kind of thing, then a lot of times they look down on you. But if you look at the books, the Bibles, all of these other things that have come along that, do talk about spirits, the spirit world. In the Bible, it's all about psychics who were seeing visions. They were prophets. Well, that's what a prophet was a psychic. And all of these things that were written, a lot of it is from someone's psychic abilities, channeling that information, making sure, and some of it was way beyond what was in their wheelhouse, So, the psychics of today, depending upon who they are and what they do and their abilities, we're the prophets of today. And you're your own natural prophet because you, in your own little world, in your own little dimensional walls and ripples of information, you pick up stuff. And maybe, if your system is ready and aligned, then you get the real messages. If not, then sometimes you get bits and pieces. And then you go, oh, I felt that. Oh, I knew this. I knew this was coming. So it's all about learning procedures because you can. There's a little bit of a discipline that goes into being a little bit more than a kitchen psychic, like a kitchen witch. Some people, it's just enough to know that, oh, I feel I sense something's happening, and that fulfills their psychic abilities for their life, and they're happy with that. And every so often they get an experience, and then they just it's minimal. Now, for me, I was very psychic as a child, but I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know. I was getting messages, I was seeing things, but I didn't know what to do with it. So when I was 18 and I found a group who was doing this kind of stuff and training, I made a discipline of it. So then I began to do a little bit of seancing. I did meditations to do the Akashic Library. I began to look deep inside myself because all of it is interior. It's not outside of you. It is an inner journey. It is going inside of your computer, what your body and your brain, that's exactly what it is. Your brain records 3 million hours worth of information. So you've got a computer that records, and every second of your life, whether you're aware of it or not, your brain is recording it. It's in there every second, every noise, every movement. And as a psychic, we learn what part of our brain, what kind of tool it is. How can I look at that and access that in a controlled manner to get a result? In the metaphysical world, I work at a metaphysical store. When people talk about spells or candles or things like that, when someone says a spell, that puts in like, ooh, what it is. What a spell is you have to understand energy, and you're taking certain types of energy putting them together in a recipe to get a result. And then you learn how to target that, magnetize that, and release that. And the same thing with psychic abilities. It all is in there. You just have to learn the technique of what you're going to, the result you want, the intent you want. And if you don't have a direct intent or a clear intent, then you won't get a clear result. And everything starts with knowing how to control your energy field, which is your aura, and how to make a boundary around your aura so you keep everything at arm's length. Because even just as a psychic or a medium or any, before not even talking channeling, you can be too open and you can pick up things. So you have to know that so that because there's plenty of people come in to me at the store. And, I'll say, where'd you get the dead boyfriend? They picked up a dead spirit somewhere that just following them around because their energy is such, it may just be on the outer reaches, but it was able to connect with them. And you have to be able to control your energy so that you don't get infected, though, so that you don't pick up things you shouldn't. So it does become a discipline. And I was trained at a time when it was still the occult. And before the internet, before all of this that we have now, which is fantastic now. It's amazing to have seen all of that. But before then, it was the occult it really didn't think you learn your P's and Q's. And then when it became New Age, then it became very relaxed. And then people would go, oh, well, I'm this, poof. Oh, I'm that, poof. But they lost the discipline of writing things down, doing journals, creating their own recipes, putting everything into their own writing, into their own hands, getting it from the brain, from the neurons, down into the fingers, down into the paper, or down from your brain, down into your feet, down into a circle of energy that you're creating. Connecting yourself to the earth, because the earth has its own energy, its own mind, its own thing. So we connect with that. But you have to, and sometimes you have to allow your electrical system to ground and to ground off energy that you don't need, which is good, do good meditations. I live in Florida, so I go jump in the ocean. And the ocean has the salt water, the sand, the quartz, in the sand, the water, everything, it pulls all of the stuff off and the impurities off amazingly. And it does it for my tools, my rings, my jewelry that I use. Everything I use, I try to make it where I can cleanse that. So where spiritualism in our culture, or right before us, I would say in my grand-grandmother's time, the spiritualist movement happened. Now, it had learned from what came before. Everybody knew there were psychic abilities and people doing things like that. Then it became a movement after the Fox sisters, little girls who were communicating with the spirit in their house, and it was knocking on the walls, and they made a game of it. And we'll be back. I think we have to take a break, so I will continue this story when we get back.
Warning, The following message does not necessarily reflect the views of WBHM-DB or its hosts, guests, listeners, or of any functioning adult in general. In fact, Frank should probably seek professional help. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi there, Frank Lee here. I thought that I would spend a few moments telling you about the positivity from the network here. The overall message of para-unity and happiness, and how everyone here wants to get along with everyone out there, and how everything is just wonderful. Wait, cat's not looking. Okay, I've got something to really tell you. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Honestly, all that being nice and positive crap was kind of hurting my soul, as dark as it is. So, what's really happening? Well, you see it all the time. Everybody and their brother out there has a paranormal team because they watched a couple of episodes of Ghost Hunters or some crap like that. So they go and they spend half their mortgage payment on tools and things that light up that they don't understand. And then the next logical step, after buying matching black t-shirts and posing like 90s rappers for their Facebook page, is to, of course, have their own podcast. Well, you know what? You're not going to find that crap here. What we have here at WBHM Digital Broadcasting is the best host, the best guest, bringing you real information. All of the hosts here on this network know their stuff. They are the people who have been out there doing the work, doing actual research. And no, by research, I don't mean binge watching some kind of cheesy TV show on Netflix. I mean reading books. I mean out in the field doing the legwork. And who are they interviewing on their shows? They're bringing you the people they have learned from. They're bringing you the best in the field, covering all kinds of topics, from UFOs and aliens to Bigfoot to cryptozoology to ghosts to anything you can think of, a bit strange and unexplained. It is here, and you're going to get the best information here. So stay tuned to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Don't go anywhere. Speaking of going somewhere, I've got to go before my mic gets cut. We'll see you there on WBHM-DB.
Hello, welcome back to Universal Truths with Mark Fults at WBHM-DB in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. And this is Mark Fults talking to you about channeling and mediumship. And I think before we had to go to break, I was starting to talk about spiritualism, the spiritualism movement. And because that really influences our idea of psychics and mediums nowadays. And, of course, started, I think it was in New York State or something. It was the Fox sisters. They were in a house. They heard knocking. They thought it was a ghost. And so they started playing games back with it. And then they ended up making communication with this spirit, which then people became fascinated with. And then the girls went on tour doing the knocking, the table tipping and the knocking on tables and talking to spirits, and people grabbed onto that, and it started a whole religious and spiritual movement. Now, some people later on, the Fox sisters went through a lot of things, and when they died, mostly they were poor and had a lot of issues and a lot of problems. And so there were a lot of people who go poo-poo on that, But something I thought was very interesting, whether you believe the Fox sisters or don't. Their house that they used, and it was actually moved, I think it burned once and was moved. I mean, some of it was moved at some point. But like around in the early 1900s, the house was empty. The children were playing in the basement, and a side wall collapsed on a child. So they got the child out, and lo and behold, there were the bones in a box of what looked like a peddler, who is who they had said they'd been talking to. There were the bones of the peddler underneath the house, and it was long after the Fox sisters were dead. So to me, it was like, well, there you go, you know. But they started a movement that just everyone, it was a good movement for women, because, and it was mostly lady driven. They would sit in their parlors, they'd have seances and table chipping, and they'd do readings, and it gave women a way to make money on their own, because at that time, you know, everybody was trying, if you weren't married by 18, you were an old maid. So, you know, most women, their future career was to be a wife and a mother. And to make money, they had to sew or go clean or cook or do something like that. And the psychic ability movement, basically, the spiritualism, made it where women could be at home and make their money and be in control of what they were doing. So it was really an early feminist movement. There were men involved, but not so many as women. And my great-grandmother, Louisiana Mosley, she was a psychic and a reader. And what happened was my great-great-grandfather came home one day when he was 50, said, "I'm retiring. I ain't doing this no more." And so she had to bring in the income for the family, so she started doing readings. And she was basically a spiritualist, and she did that. And there were stories of the family children would test her. They would hide things. And she was spot on, would tell them where it was. You know, they could never trip her up. And then she was, you know, she was just part of that movement. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, who was very, very psychic, she was very psychic, that they were in such a very strict Christian belief system when my grandmother was growing up, that they were fascinated with it, but they also poo-pooed it as well, you know. But my grandmother would tell fantastic stories, and I witnessed some of her stuff. And but it was just an accepted fact, because of the spiritualist movement. It came into the consciousness of the American people, and so there's tons of stories from the town I came from the 1800s, 1900s, spiritualist readers, you know, just it was there was a large spiritualist camp in Chattanooga that had a beautiful waterfall property and everything, and they had people coming and doing 1,000 people at a time doing a seance over a natural stone bridge in front of a waterfall. Had to be amazing. But where I came from in the South, some of the local churches got nervous about it, and the KKK shut them down. And then some people in 1926, some ladies tried to restart the spiritualist movement churches in Chattanooga, and They got their throats cut and stacked up like cordwood, and by people who were from a church who said, "Oh, maybe the devil did it," so, but they were a threat to organized religion. So, and on top of that, Houdini, who was mad because he couldn't communicate with spirits, he went after them terribly. Because, out of everybody, you have honest people, and you always will have someone who pulls something. So he went after and thought everybody was a fraud. And if he couldn't find something on them, I've heard that he did plant stuff on certain people to try to just ruin them. And because he started doing that, because it had been so popular, it all of a sudden became like the devil's work. So, he helped tamp it down. Now, it's still around in some churches. There are some spiritualist churches and things, but he pretty well destroyed it from being, because at one point it was, I would say it would probably be as big as being a Baptist. You would know about it, Now it's just specialty places and specialty groups. And so to me, when I started learning, I kind of went back to the spiritualism, because to me, the things that ignited my brain in the 70s, right when, and a lot of you kids out there won't even know what I'm talking about, before there was cable and all that stuff, if you had a TV, you had like 3 channels. The generation before me went from not having TV to having TV. They had movies, but not TV, and they have radio. In my generation, we had black and white TV. I remember when it turned color in the 60s. And then we went to cable in the late 70s. And then you all of a sudden went from 3 channels that went off at 12 o'clock to round the clock stuff. So you start seeing all of these things. And the things that really ignited my brain, there was a movie called The Changeling. If you've never seen it, you go on YouTube. I think it's free on there to watch. It was a really effective ghost story. And it still stands up. It will, if you haven't seen it, it should scare the what out of you. But there's one part in the movie where they bring in a psychic. First of all, the house that this is going on in, love it. Scary as hell. But the specific room is an attic room. So the psychic comes to talk to the spirit. And the way the movie is done, it's so realistic in the way it does. It's not like a blood and guts kind of movie. Even though there's violence, it's still it seemed real in the way that they approached it. And so when the psychic was sitting down doing automatic writing, which we'll cover that later, she went into a trance, and she was being a medium. So this is what she did as a medium. She started, she was in a trance, her mind was open, and she was open for communication, and she had paper and pencil, and she began writing messages. And I became absolutely, totally fascinated with that. And I thought, I have to do this. There's one part where she's talking to the spirit, and they thought it was another spirit, another case or situation. And she's going, "Are you the girl killed by the coal cart?" And I was like, I've got to do this. I've got to do this. So I did. But I had to do it on my own. It wasn't something that the people I was being trained by were thrilled about. But and it really is kind of a throwback to spiritualist techniques. So I learned how to do automatic writing, which goes into mediumship. And we have, let me see, what is the other thing that inspired me? There was something else today that kicked it all off. But that one, you got to watch that movie, The Changeling. But and there were a lot of movies when I was young that had Ouija boards, and then because of the 60s and the hippie movement, it was real big. All of that, Dark Shadows. They were having Dark Shadows. They were having seances weekly, and I was hooked on that. I wasn't having seances when I was 6 and 7, but when I was 18, 19, 20, I did start working on them. And it just was, the fascinating thing the brain does with it. I had to learn that. I had to do that. So as I became older and I got the chance, I started doing those things. And I started off as a medium because psychically, I was psychic, but I didn't know in the beginning. I could see, I could hear, but I didn't know always what to do with it. But I learned discipline and technique. And when I got older, it fell into place, and then I knew what to do with it. But up until that point, it was like hit and miss. I would go look at ghosts and see ghosts. I was very successful going and seeing and finding a ghost or a ghost finding me. But I just didn't know how to keep the communication going or what they were trying to tell me or how to process it. So, and when I had my trauma, when I was 30, I was attacked in a random act of violence and died twice out of that and came back. And then it started to fall in place and make sense. But not everybody needs to go get killed to be a medium or to be a psychic. But I have to say, if I would have liked it to have been some other way, but it worked well. I mean, I have the results off of it, and I am helping people. So, it is what it is. But when I started getting on my own, then I began to do seancing. Then I began to do automatic writing. And they go just to the edge of mediumship. Now, when we talk about the tools we use, I think the different layers now, and someone can correct me if I'm not right, but I think we have 4 different kind of like layers that we use, which is theta, alpha, theta, and delta. And theta is like being awake, like we are, and being conscious and listening to things. And delta is like being in the deep subconscious, being tranced enough to where you can access the Akashic. So in between, you have the theta and, the alpha. And I use alpha all the time. My meditations take me to, I have a working level on alpha that is pretty unique. And when I do my Akashic Library meditations that I teach, I take you deep into Hello. This is Cattywampus Thursday, really, on Universal Truth, because I was just chit-chatting, and apparently I got cut off. And that happens a lot electronically when you're dealing with spiritual stuff. So just bear with me, children. Just bear with me. Now, I was talking about the levels of consciousness that mediums and channelers and psychics access, which that would be your beta, your alpha, your theta, and your delta. Now, if I were, and I believe that's correct, it's been a long time since I've had to even talk about alpha or anything like that. But the meditations I teach as a psychic, I use my alpha level all the time. Every day I'm doing meditation, I'm doing prayers, I'm at that level. And when I teach people to do inner exploration, going into the Akashic or any of that, I teach them how to reach their alpha level, because that's not as deep as you're going to go. But that is, between the alpha and the theta, is where you're opening up the third eye, truly. And then you can access the deeper part of the cerebellum. So I teach people how to access the alpha like they're just doing it all the time. And it's to learn how to do that, of course, I teach them their energy work. And at some time I'll do a show like that and show people how to do your own energy level so that you can be safe while you're accessing the information, which you're accessing it inside. You're not going outside of your body for it. So you have to go learn the process of how to get to those levels and how to create constructs to say, okay, well, I'm not going to go into the deep subconscious right now, but I am going to sit here in an office space I've created in my alpha state to work on things like songs, art, creativity, problem solving, math. And you can do all that on alpha without having to do too much further. And but when you're in alpha and all that, and theta is the eye is opening, the third eye opens, which is controlled with the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland and the neurons. So you open the third eye. Then you can use information at that alpha level that will come through the third eye. You don't have to necessarily go into the deep subconscious. But then if you want to do the deep subconscious, you have to do it safely and know how to do it. Then you can access that. But it's all like flexing a muscle. You have to learn a little bit at a time and learn how to process what you've just done. It's very important to do something, give it a little minute to settle in, do it again, let it rest. Do it again, let it rest. You build up the muscle. So being a medium, which I'm really I'm 100 pounds more than what I used to be, so I'm a medium large. But I started getting interested in going deeper. And my psychic abilities picked up, and unfortunately, for a while, I would know, we had a lot of family members die in a clump, like in the 80s. And I could tell them 2 or 3 days before that somebody was going to die, that we didn't know was going to die. And my family, I think, thought I was killing them, going and say, to make my prediction come through, which it wasn't that. I was just actually listening to my body, listening to my mind. And And I was being exposed. The more that my mediumship, the more that I worked on it, the more that I worked on automatic writing, the more I did that, worked that muscle, then I became more psychic and was picking up stuff. And I didn't necessarily always know what to do with it at that time. So I lived in a haunted place, had ghosts and shadow figures, and had, a woman that would appear out of a corner and come to the corner of my bed and stand there waiting for me to tell her, go away, or waiting like a fetch, But I didn't know all of what they were. I just would see them. And that's part of, too, where people go, well, I'm an empath. I think that's where you're at the level of picking it up and understanding it's something, not necessarily always doing something with it, but you sense. But it's a very important part of it, and as a psychic, you could make your psychic abilities where you can turn them down so you don't have to listen to it if it's too much. Because if you don't watch it, I've had dead spirits standing by my bed twiddling their thumbs, and I had to learn how to just turn it off and say, I'm not dealing with that right now. Come back or later or just go away, if it was something I didn't need to deal with. And that's something else. You're not always supposed to deal with everything. There are certain things that sometimes you have to leave alone. But you have to know how to do that and how to keep it from coming into your energy field to bug the crap out of you. And that is just a part of life. That's just something that you go through. And it just all comes from experience. And if you don't have, if you're going to be just a psychic who your sister who just say, I sense something going on, you just let it ride and stop at a certain level and never go beyond that. Then sometimes for some people it's a need. And in my case, it was a need. It was I could not stop being fascinated with it and learning it and wanting to learn my inner journey, because you have all that information in you, in your DNA, in your brain. So I was on a journey, but I had some, hard knocks when I was younger. I would go to graveyards, pick up a ghost, see them, but, until I understood my energy field, I didn't know how to get rid of them. And I had to learn all of that. You have to really be able to protect yourself. So now we have like 4 types of mediumship. You have spiritual mediumship, which is like clairvoyance, clairaudience. That's where your messages are received. So that's your tuning device that's picking it up. And sometimes the medium can give a message, say, grandma says hi or whatever. The second form, physical mediumship, which this is where people do like table tipping. Sometimes there's ectoplasm, so either the spirit's ectoplasm or sometimes the psychic's ectoplasm. And actually in the old days, that was something people would try to do, is to expel ectoplasm so you could see a physical thing of it. And that also is the level where you get where your face changes and things like that, your voice, and things appear and disappear. And I'll come back to that because I have a story for that. The third one is energy mediumship. This is where where you do like healing, or if you go to a Pentecostal church, or kind of like being a shaman. And it's a little different. It's not necessarily channeling, but you are channeling the energy. That's like in physics. You have crystals. They used to have crystal tubes for TVs and radios because the crystal could take that energy, send, receive, transmit a frequency. So you're kind of doing that. You learn through your own energy to become a conduit and transform energy and send it and transmit it. Now, being a channel is a little different because you create a platform in yourself that the spirits can come through and manifest. And I'll give an example of that. I did a channeling here in Pensacola, and actually on my YouTube channel, just look up Mark Fults, Fults, and look up the grave is cold and wet. There's an old funeral home down here I went to, and it's very haunted. No, it's a boutique, but it was a funeral home. And I was doing something else, trying to channel Martha Beck, the serial killer, who had worked there, been pickled there when she was executed, and then she was buried down the street, but she haunts the building. So I was trying to talk to her, and I communicated with this spirit who wanted to talk. So I came back and did that. And the spirit, pretty well, what I had to do is I made a open channel, but I make like an energy Teflon coating. So if a spirit comes in, I can eject it very easily. So on the film, you see the spirit coming in, going across my face, going down my mouth. And then when it reached into my solar plexus or my shallow, my face changed, my voice changed, and I could see, the spirit could see through my eyes, but I could see through its eyes. And when I looked through its eyes, or his eyes, he was laying in a casket that was full of water. The lining of the coffin was laying on his face. It was all dark and moldy and cold. And all he could really say was, the grave is cold and wet. I'm cold. And so I channeled that spirit. That's a little different than if I were just doing mediumship and I was sitting there just talking to it through automatic writing or just listening and relaying messages. When I do channeling, the spirit actually comes into the body. But if you don't have control of your own energy, you can get infected with these things. So it's something that, again, I work with to learn how to protect myself. And when it's done, it's done. I disconnect, I go and I ground, and I'm such a control freak. I never lose consciousness ever during the whole thing. I'm still conscious. Now, some of the things I won't remember are some of the things that are being said or being said to. I always have a questioner so that they can ask a question so that that spirit can answer what we want to know. Because when I'm being the channeler, I'm being like the chair, and the spirit sits in the chair, and while it's sitting in the chair, it can take questions and answers, but when it's done, it leaves the chair, and I make sure that it cannot come with me home, and that's channeling. And on my channel, I've channeled, I wanted to go talk to the Bell Witch. I'd had an experience with her when I went to the Bell Witch Cave. And I just don't have the money. And during COVID, we don't have a way to go there and go to the cave, which is in Kentucky. But as a channeler, you don't have to go to the site. You can make a phone call, basically, to that spirit, and if it's willing, then you open up the avenue and the spirit comes in. You talk to that spirit, which, of course, the Bell Witch was created to, it was actually an older energy. And it was brought forth to get rid of John Bell for a lot of reasons, apparently. But when it had done its job, the person who had called it had already died. So when she was done, she was free to do what she wanted. So she moved into the cave there on that property, and she's there. She likes to talk to she likes to talk to metaphysical people. And when I went, I had an experience with her. I did see part of her feet, her shoes. And so I wanted to talk to her. So we did a channeling where I opened up and I called the Bell Witch, and she answered. And when I'm doing the channeling, I have lung damage. I have a lot of things. So I can't hold notes real long or breathe hold my breath very long. But when I channel and they're coming in to sit into the chair in my shadow, basically I'm the chair. So they come in and sit, come in the mouth, go down to the shadow. When she was coming in, she sounded like a wind, like a storm. And I was making these I could hear it sounded like a very strong storm going through the cave. And then she talked. Well, when she talked, it was anticlimactic because she was just charming and interesting and chatty. But the connection of the spirit is fascinating. In channeling, when I do it, it scares the hell out of people sometimes because I have to raise my frequency to get the other spirit, which is a frequency. I have to raise my frequency and pierce. I have what I call a veil splitter. So I've split the veil so that spirit and energy can have easy access to come in. But all that sound that I'm using is also putting a Teflon coating on my system so that when I'm finished, I'm in control of it. So mostly when I do channeling, it's very dramatic, very scary sounding. The first time that it really hit me, back in about 1999, 2000, I've been fascinated with it. Well, I've been doing a lot of energy work, and it was time for me to channel. And it wasn't necessarily that I chose to do it at that time, but I had a friend, Lori Shaw Lee, who had a metaphysical store, and she's a witch. And we were in Chattanooga. She had this store, and she had a group. And a lot of my friends were in the group. So all of a sudden, I started having contractions. The spirit wanted to communicate, and it was my first real channeling. So I had to make it to her store. I got in the store. I said, close the door. Something's happening. And some of the members were there. We called some of the other ones. I said, you've got to make a protective circle. I'm channeling something, and it's coming through. So they made a circle. I laid in the circle, and the most ungodly noise started coming out of my mouth, and I quit breathing, and I held this note for about 5 minutes, and everyone was just shocked. But then the spirit of this priestess who had been killed probably around the time of Pompeii, when men started going around killing all the priestesses so that they could replace the matriarchal with the patriarchal. So they killed a lot of the priestesses and worshippers of the female goddesses that were being worshipped, and then they replaced them with their gods. So she was a priestess who was from the Mediterranean somewhere, and she and a couple of other priestesses with her. They were captured. They were taken on a boat, and the men tied them to the bow of the boat, and they were burned. They were sacrificed to a sun god. So they were burnt in the sun. So when I started talking her, you could smell wet. It smelled like wet, burnt wood, and I was laying flat. I have a very bad back. I can't jump up and fly or do anything like that. I was laying flat, and this woman wanted to talk to Lori. So all of a sudden, that pitch came through, scared all of them to death, and I flew up like a stick. And I flew across. I sprang up and jumped in front of Lori and was looking at her in the eyes. And they were all afraid to me. But I told them, don't make any quick moves. Don't panic. But it very well looked like I could eat them. They were all scared. And there were some messages came through. But it was and they saw an old woman being projected on my face and on my body. So that was channeling. And the first time it happened to me, it was contractions. It was painful, but it was the most satisfying thing in that department because I'd done it. It opened up my channels from an ancient source. And since then, I've used that mechanism to channel nowadays. And so it's I like to do it more than I get to right now, but I'm going to be doing more filmings of that kind of thing. We're about to go to a break, but we'll be right back to you, and I'll pick this right back up. Don't you go anywhere. See you in a minute.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Louise Schiavone. NATO leaders convening today in Brussels moved to send more military aid to Ukraine to repel Russia's now month-old invasion, but once again rejected an appeal to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine. NATO also stood firm against sending troops into Ukraine, fearing an all-out war against Russia and a potential nuclear confrontation. However, NATO is boosting troop presence on the eastern flank of NATO nations. On the ground in Ukraine, the fighting continues without either side gaining a strong advantage. NPR's Nathan Rott has more from Lviv.
The Institute for the Study of War, a U.S.-based think tank, is actually describing it as a, quote, protracted and stalemated conflict. So Russian troops have made little headway in capturing the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, resorting instead, it seems, to just hammering the city and its suburbs, as it really has others in the last 4 weeks, with artillery and bombs. And that, sadly, is why we're seeing so many civilian casualties and people displaced.
NPR's Nathan Rott in Lviv. The United States has agreed to accept as many as 100,000 people seeking to escape the war in Ukraine. It has also pledged to increase support for Eastern European nations that have taken in most of the Ukrainian refugees. A new NPR Ipsos poll finds that a majority of Americans disapprove of President Biden's response to the war. NPR's Joel Rose has details.
Only 36% of Americans say President Biden is doing a good job in response to the war in Ukraine, while 52% say he is not. That second number is driven largely by Republicans. 81% say the president's response has not been good. Overall, more than 60% of Americans say the U.S. should give Ukraine some of the support it wants, while still trying to avoid a larger military conflict with Russia. That was consistent across the political spectrum. The poll also found broad support for admitting Ukrainian civilians who are fleeing the war. The poll was taken before President Biden traveled to Europe to meet with allies and pledged that the U.S. would take in 100,000 refugees. Joel Rose, NPR News.
Arizona lawmakers have sent a 15-week abortion ban to the desk of Republican Governor Doug Ducey. NPR's Sarah McCammon reports.
Both chambers of the Arizona state legislature have approved a bill modeled after a Mississippi law that's currently before the U.S. Supreme Court. The Arizona legislation would ban abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, except for certain medical emergencies. Healthcare providers who violate the law could lose their licenses and face hefty fines. Florida's legislature recently approved a similar bill. A Supreme Court decision regarding Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban is expected this summer. If the court overturns decades of precedent guaranteeing abortion rights, dozens of state laws restricting the procedure could be allowed to take effect. Sarah McCammon, NPR News.
The Dow closed up 349. This is NPR News. Mortgage giant Freddie Mac says the average rate on a 30-year loan this week jumped to 4.4%, up from 4.16% last week. Over the past 2 weeks, long-term loan rates have risen more than a half point and are now at the highest level since January 2019. This follows the Federal Reserve's decision last week to increase the key rate by more than a quarter point in response to inflation. The 15-year-old accused of killing 4 of his classmates and wounding others in Oxford, Michigan in November will remain in a jail for adults. NPR's Cheryl Corley reports.
Early on, the defense team for the 15-year-old alleged Oxford high school shooter argued that he should be held in a juvenile detention center. However, Ethan Crumbley, who's been charged with several counts of murder, has been held without bond in the Oakland County Jail in Michigan. During this latest pretrial hearing for him, a circuit court judge reaffirmed the teenager would remain in the county jail. It's a status that comes under review every 30 days as required by a federal law that protects the rights of incarcerated juveniles. Crumbley's parents have also been charged with involuntary manslaughter. Earlier this week, a judge ordered that their son's name not be spoken or used during their cases. Cheryl Corley, NPR News.
On the final day of Senate confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, legal experts testified to her sterling reputation and exceptional competence. A final vote on the nomination is expected in April. I'm Louise Schiavone, NPR News, Washington.
This message is brought to you by the NPR Coffee Club. A subscription brings fresh roasted coffee directly to your door, and you can also give a gift subscription to the NPR superfan in your life. Learn more about our new NPR blends by visiting us at nprcoffeeclub.org.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to Universal Truths with Mark Fults, also known as the Fat Psychic, and we are coming to you from WBHM-DB in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. But of course, I am sitting in Pensacola, Florida, so we're coming to you from Birmingham. And that, in the old days, they would think that was mystical. We're talking across the air, kids. It's a miracle. Now, I will continue to tell you a few stories about channeling. And in the 80s and 90s, there were quite a few channelers who came to be very famous. And some of them got big groups and big followings and big church, made like a church and all of this. And again, you have a lot of people who do things. It's natural, it's wonderful, it's spiritual, it's sweet. And then sometimes you see people who see that and they can see the dollar sign. Or they can see the ego and the dollar sign. And that's where you have to be careful. Now, channeling was very big in the 1880s, and then we went through a cycle of it. There was kind of like a movement back into the spiritual stuff. Usually when big wars happen, like World War I, World War II, people get interested in spiritualism and talking to spirits and talking to their dead one who's dead somewhere you'll never know, you'll never see them again, so you want to talk to their spirit. And in the 60s, we had so much upheaval and we had the Vietnam War, and lots of people going off to a very heated situation. A lot of them never to come back, never to be found. We had the assassination of our presidents. We had a lot of our icons from the 50s and early 60s die, like Marilyn Monroe, like Martin Luther King, and people were, Kennedy was murdered, the president of all things, murdered. And so we had a movement then that started up. And so people started investigating, being psychic, being channeling, doing this stuff, and starting groups. I mean, that's where a lot of our, my metaphysical groups, I knew a lot of old folks that had been psychics and witches and all sorts of metaphysical things in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then, and they had their own brand of things that kind of came and went. It was big. The window opens, the window closes. Right now, the window is open. So, but there were people then that I knew that there were some people into it for the spiritual aspect. Then there were people in it for the ego who were trying to act like they knew everything, and you need to follow me and only listen to me and bring me lots of money and bring me lots of fame. And a lot of it, and there were some that were into it for the profit, and they misled people. It's not typical, but you only need one or two to really stand out. And then we had things like Jamestown, where Jones, the guy who got all those people in Ghana to follow him and then kill, drink the Kool-Aid, and they were giving their own children and killing themselves, following a man who they should not have followed. He wasn't a god. He wasn't any of that. He was just somebody who found a trick. There are a lot of people listening, and there's a lot of people, they will follow the strongest voice they hear. So you have to develop your own voice so that you have a grounding and before you follow anyone else. Because when you follow someone else's voice, they may have an ulterior motive that may not have anything to do with you. And there's been quite a few things like that. There have been people who came up and were channelers, and they're channeling these big spirits, or they're doing this, they're doing that. And then they turn out in disaster, or people find out they've been conned. That's a whole different thing. And then, too, we had, I forget what the name of the group was, but the people who were following the man that they wanted to catch the tail of Halley's Comet. And they killed themselves so they could go catch the tail of Halley's Comet. Or, I've seen other things where people just have these groups. They treat the people terribly. It begins, a lot of perverted stuff going on. And those are just extreme examples. That's like having a serial killer. There's not that many of them, but they get a lot of attention when you catch them. There's just some of those that got a lot of bad publicity, and it makes it harder on the ones that are actually trying to do something for someone's good, to help someone, to use their gift, their goddess-given gifts, to help people to make life better, to treat animals better, to treat people decently, maybe for us to evolve. Because that's what we're here for on a spiritual level, is to evolve, to learn, that's why we have our incarnation. People who didn't quite get it the first time, they can come back and catch that bus and try it again. So, it's because we need to evolve spiritually. So anytime that you're doing something, it's okay to go to group things. It's okay to be around people doing stuff. But watch out for someone starting to control who you are, what you think, that you can't live without them. You have to listen only to the voice coming out of their mouth. You have to be careful of that. Channeling is a fantastic, wonderful thing done realistically, done authentically. It's a gift that I just don't know what I would do without, because I really do love it. I love being a medium. I love being a psychic. I love being a channeler. I can't imagine trying to take people, take their money, take their life, and make them and put them into slavery, basically, to follow something I'd have to say. I want you to be a goat. I want you to listen to you. I want you to listen to other people, but I want you to be firm in what you know and what you do. And if it ain't right, you put the stops to it. You don't do it. If the first moment you start to go, maybe this isn't good, listen to that little voice in your head. If someone tries to just take you down the money route, the ego route, you must follow me, I am the leader, you want to be a sheep, don't be a sheep. Don't go, making little villages so you can all just be following one person. Everyone is fallible, and some people, if they have a talent and we're doing it naturally, and then people follow them, and then the ego gets involved in the power, it can go south very badly. And I have seen people who do channeling, but once you do channeling, you know if it's real or not. And you feel it in your gut, basically, because it's where your solar plexus is. You get all your information in and out of where your belly button is, basically. So that area, that shallow. So you need to be careful. You need to always check the person out. Now, I will tell you, there was a guy, I'm trying to think what his name was. The first time, this is what ignited me about channeling. Because I had seen some people try it, and they were full of it. And they would sit there. There was a guy, I won't say his name, but he would say he was a channeler. And all these, he had huge followings. And I listened to recordings he would do for people. And his channeling effect would be, I am now channeling Yul Brynner. I am now channeling Mother Murray. I am now channeling Jesus. I am now channeling the devil. And as I am channeling the devil, as the devil, I'm going to ask you, lady, would you like to go have a drink, perhaps, with me? That was his extent of channeling. And people would pay to go and listen to him talk, and then he would say awful things about the women. He'd be trying to hit on them, and saying it was the channeling, it's the spirit. And he would talk about their private parts, their everything parts, and, what if. And if I had been a woman and he had said there, I would have punched him out. And but he had a huge following. So I realized people don't always use the best ideas of discretion when they're listening to channelers. So you gotta, if it starts to smell like horse manure, it is. Now, what inspired me? I think, and I want to say it was in the 90s, early 90s. And I was watching this. They would have these big shows like, That's Incredible kind of stuff. And they had a show. I can't remember the name of it, but you'll be able to look it up. There was a man on there, Bill Burns. And they had Marilyn Monroe's first husband, and he was going to do, I think it was Andy Kaufman and Marilyn Monroe. And Marilyn Monroe's husband was sitting there, her first husband, and he knew things about her other people just didn't know, when she was still Norma Jean. And I was like, yeah. I'd watched people do channeling, and I was kind of like, yeah. It was kind of, you could just smell it. It was a stinker. So this man named Bill Burns, Burns, and he was going to channel Marilyn. Now, some guys trying to channel Marilyn Monroe, that was a new one for me. And I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting. But when he started to do it, you could see, and I started chills. I get chills. You could see the spirit, the energy going into his system, moving under his skin, basically. And then he began to talk. And he was talking to her husband. I think his name was Daughtery. Last name was Daughtery. Jim Daughtery. And he started talking to him. And he understood what she was referring to through Bill Burns. And I don't know other people's response to it, but he was, in my opinion, that moment, whatever he's done before or since, that moment, that was the real deal. And when I saw that, and my electrical system was going wah, 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 because my system was willing to do that. And I was like, that's it. That's the real deal. And so I used that as my starting point. I want that feeling to begin with. I want to be open enough to where the spirit can come in and have conversation and give messages if necessary. But I wanted to do that. That's like the automatic writing. That's like the seancing. They just affect me. When they hit me, it's like, that's the universe is telling me that's what you got to be doing, boy. Do it. And the first thing to do is to, it took me a while to get over the idea of being scared of it a little bit, because I thought, ooh, I'm going to lose control. What. So I had to start off slowly. And then when it all started happening, like the story I told you where I had, contractions, I had to give a channeling here, it happened. And, if you let it progress naturally, it's so much stronger. It's so much deeper. And once you finish, you don't feel depleted. You feel invigorated. You may be tired, but you feel fantastic. When I've done it, at the end of it, I feel I want to go eat a huge meal. I want to talk for hours. I feel like every cell and particle in my body has been activated. You feel more alive talking to the dead, because the dead aren't dead. So you're speaking to an energy, a consciousness that is there. You can't see it, that you can feel it. And as it's going into your body, you see the transformation. With Bill Burns, I saw the transformation. I haven't seen the video in years, but I remember him because he was fantastic. And, you know, I mean, I'm 60 years old. I got a beard, you know, and too, you have to get over the consciousness of worrying about what is someone going to think. You know, when you're talking, hello, I'm never than you, that you have to be brave enough and say secure within yourself to be able to talk to male or female. Now, I'll show you another example that's not so hot with channeling and mediumship and bringing in spirits. Because I built my own communication devices because I channel those designs. I charge the art, charge the paper, charge the board, charge the fine chat. You know, I do a week's worth of meditation before I touch them. And so when I do a communication with my communication devices, it's a well-oiled machine. And I'm channeling, I'm being a medium, I'm doing all of it. And so it's always good. Now, here's an example of something that wasn't so hot. Back in the 70s, I knew some metaphysical people. And I think it was, at the time, I think they were like in Washington State or something like that. But these two little girls were going to play with the Ouija board. And they both wanted to contact, one wanted to contact Marilyn Monroe, and one wanted to contact Jean Harlow. Now, they didn't just want to contact them. They wanted to be them. So the first one wanted to contact Jean Harlow. And for you youngsters who don't know what a Jean Harlow is, shame on you. She was the predecessor of Marilyn Monroe. She died in 1936, I think, at 26 years old or something like that. She was a beautiful blonde who died tragically. And the little girl that wanted to bring Jean Harlow into herself, she contacted the spirit and she goes, I want to be Jean Harlow. Now, this is where you have to watch out what you say, how you do it, how you say it. She said, I want to be Jean Harlow. Now, we're talking about a 10-year-old girl. Immediately, she fell down in renal failure. She collapsed because Jean Harlow died of renal failure. When she said, I want to be Jean Harlow, she didn't say, I want to be beautiful and famous and talented like Jean. I want you to influence that. She said, I want to be Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow is dead. So the little girl started dying immediately. They put her into a hospital. The mother knew these metaphysical people. They came to the hospital, circled the girl, and got the spirit to leave. And the little girl became all right because the spirit was gone. But so when you ask and talk to spirits, you have to think outside of the box. And you don't want to open yourself to something like that. Luckily for that little girl, these metaphysical people were around, or she would have been dead. She would have been Jean Harlow. She would have been dead. And that was the bad Marilyn and Jean Harlow experience. The other one with Bill Burns was amazing and wonderful, but also with when you do channeling, things people like Marilyn Monroe. For Marilyn Monroe was a tortured person, and her spirit we need to let the portal thing go. But that was fascinating. And then after it, I went, oh, you know, and she didn't seem too upset about doing it. But I know other people who tried to contact her, and she just really was like, please let me alone. I just want to go on. And when you have millions of people with hundreds of thousands of people fascinated, focusing on her and trying to keep her close to them instead of letting her spirit go do what it needs to do, that can cause problems. So just because you can do it doesn't always mean you should. But he did it. He did a great job, and I thought he did great. The witches, I knew they said that little girl. So, and I'm sure Jean Harlow's spirit wasn't trying to hurt the little girl, but that was, but it was the way she said it. Her wish was granted, basically. Now, what does channeling mean? To convey, to transport, to transmit, to relay, or to cause something to pass through. You're allowing something to pass through. And like a performer, if you see a drag queen doing Patsy Climbs, and she's channeling Patsy Cline, and you get the chills, you can see, that kind of thing. And it's the same kind of thing, because a drag queen is someone who takes and alters their appearance to bring on the appearance of another person. So it's a kind of, you can use that idea in channeling. You can dress up in antique clothing. You can create an atmosphere. You can put on makeup. You can transform your outer self to make a more comfortable seat for the interior. And now, when I've been telling you to do channeling, I'm also saying, before you do channeling or mediumship or anything, learn how to control your aura. Learn how to control an energy field, a circle, drawing a circle around you that keeps the filter, that keeps everything out of your aura that you don't need. Because I always want to tell people, this isn't new. Channeling was being done before probably people really had words, language. They were trying to contact the gods. They were trying to contact spirits. And they were doing it naturally. And when you're doing it as a skill, you need to have the skills. You need to have the energy around you in working order so that you do not overdo yourself, because our body is like an envelope. The spirit fits in the envelope. And in the spirit is another envelope, which is the soul, which is the oldest part. That's a little sliver that we get into each body. So there's the soul, and it becomes the spirit you develop into. And the spirit is in the envelope of the body. And then the envelope of the body is in between the dimensional walls. And in that dimensional hallway that we're in, there's time. Time is just a frequency, and it's flowing around us like water, and it's going past us and in front of us and ahead of us. And then we're picking up information from that energy that's going ahead of us that we've not quite reached there yet. But in our physical form, we're a denser material, so we're picking it up a little slowly. So you're like an envelope within an envelope within an envelope within a hallway of information. And you have to just walk that line. You have to, if I want to look at this, I have to make sure I know what I'm doing. And I can turn it on, turn it down, turn it, you don't turn it off, but you can turn it all down. Now, something I do in my line of work, I have lots of people come in that need readings. And then there are a lot of people who come in that have mental and emotional and chemical issues. And I have to take those people aside and say, all right, what you're experiencing is not spiritual. It is, you're experiencing it. But it's being caused by a chemical imbalance, or it's being caused by emotional issue, or it can be something else. And sometimes if your protective system doesn't exist because of depression or drinking or drugs, you can get multiple personalities from spirits who are hooking onto you because you have nothing to keep them out. I did a reading one time. This girl, I like the girl. Her name was Tracy. 20 years, 30 years ago. And she had this boyfriend you just wouldn't have believed. He was one of these people, if there had just been a wood chipper or something close by, well, that, I didn't say that. I mean, I make fun of, faces like, the wood chipper spits out glitter, but he was a terrible person. He was just an egomaniac creep. And he was on all sorts of drugs. And she, of all things, wanted me to read for him. And he was in there, downing me the whole time I'm doing it. But I did it. But when I looked at him, which through mediumship, I can see people's auras and see their umbilical cords, their little silver cord. And you got to keep your little silver cord working. It's connected to the other side, and it keeps the spirit from sucking energy out of your body. So you got to keep your cord going. And his cord there were just a line of these discarnate, horrifying-looking zombies-looking dead people holding onto his cord. And I said, you have got to get rid of that. You've got to make your system protected, or you're going to get multiple personalities and go crazy. And I can't tell you what he told me, but it wasn't very pleasant and what I could do with me and everything. So telling me, 2 weeks later, he went nuts. And they found him in downtown Chattanooga in his underwear, running around the streets, breaking store windows because he was bananas. And they took and put him in the mental hospital. And I will tell you, sometimes there are people who have multiple personalities, and it's a mental issue. There are some that they're just so open, so depressed, I mean, their system is depressed. They have no filter, no protection. Then the spirits just hook into it. And so they're listening, and they're having a real experience of other voices, other things that are, and a lot of that, will go on until the person dies, or they can't get any more out of that person, then they'll go somewhere else. Because, they want entertainment, they want energy, they want food. If you can't feed them, then sometimes it kills the person because they absorb the minerals, they absorb the iron out of the blood, so you become anemic. You can get cancer, you can get leukemia. When you're feeding all these energies that aren't supposed to be there, it's like having parasites. It's like having either tapeworms or ticks. Imagine, it's like a spiritual tick invasion, and you don't do anything about it. You don't get rid of them, then you become anemic, and eventually, there's nothing for you to live on. You're not able to feed yourself. So you have to be careful not to get into that. That's why I say, always create a safe space for you. Because channeling is a wonderful thing. It is something I really, really love. And it's an honor. To have the skill to do it and understand it, and to do what my ancestors were doing around a fire, thousands of years ago, and to know that it's still working and it still functions and it still benefits me and it benefits other people, it's fantastic. But it comes with a cost if you don't respect it. it comes to the cost if you don't take the steps to protect yourself and understand your own energy. And I can say right now, I'm doing a lot of meditation classes at my store at Live and Let Live in Pensacola. And 10 years ago, you couldn't get a lot of people to just sit down and listen. They would get bored. They couldn't do a meditation. I see kids. I see middle-aged people. I see people my age, up in the 60s or so, coming in, sitting down, listening, doing, experiencing. And then I've got people who, because of the thrill of they get the first taste of it, then they want to know more. They want to be more. So, they get kind of fascinated. And I have to take that in as a responsibility. And I train them. If I train them, I train them. If I don't, I'll work with them and I'll help them do the meditation. But I don't want to be followed like I'm a guru. But I will be there and be like the training wheels on a bicycle, which is what your teachers should be. They should want you to be able to fly. But before you fly, they got to get you grounded. And I get them grounded, then I teach them to fly. And if it's something that means something to them, like for me, it became, I'm sorry, I just got choked. We have a break. When we come back, we'll get right back on this subject. Talk to you in a minute. See?
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Universal Truths with Mark Fults, coming to you from WBHM-DB in Birmingham, Alabama. We're coming to the close of our talk tonight, and we're talking channeling. And I'm going to round it up with also with channeling. You have the aspect of healers, and a lot of healers do channeling. Because you're transmitting the energy from another source through you to heal someone else or to pull something out of someone else and pass it along. And also there are churches where, Pentecostal, where people lay hands upon people. I have seen people healed that way. And I also have worked with, which is the metaphysical people that I know. They're all very positive. One time they would say, lady 25, 30 years ago, that she had a tumor. And my friend said, come here, let's do this. And we did an energy raising, and her tumor went away. And it freaked her out, and then she couldn't handle it. And I was like, it healed you, through frequency. But what we were doing was doing what healers do, which is to do that, you have to be careful because you have to ground yourself. You have to be able to pull in energy, but also ground it to where you're not taking it in. You're passing it to the earth. You're passing it somewhere else. But you need to make it something natural. Because some people say, oh, I throw it in the natural fire of the earth. You need to really, the earth takes grounding, can take energy and then repurposes it. So I use grounding into the earth. But if you don't ground the energy and you don't know how to pass it through, you're being a conduit. You're transmitting it. You're not supposed to keep it. So I knew a lot of healers who were very sick because they were great at healing the person, but they pulled the illness into them. So if you're going to do that kind of thing, you have to, again, know how to deal with it, know how to ground it, know how to look at the energy, know how to process it in a way where you're only directing it either to or from, but you're not to keep it. And if you keep it, you'll get sick from all this stuff. And a lot of people who are doing psychic stuff and mediumship, they pull in everything they can. And you can't do that if you're doing readings for people. You have to learn not to take on all that energy and not be able to process it somehow, or to let it go into a filtering system somewhere else. Because if you do readings for people, you're going to have people coming in. I've had people come in that are suicidal, that are depressed, that are manic, that are ill, that are dying. And when you do the reading for them, you're pulling information from them, but you have to be careful not to pull the energy into your field where you keep it. You have to let it flow past you. It's like you're just directing traffic. You're directing the energy to or the energy from. If you don't get a good system like that, you can be sick. You can die from these kind of things. And again, sometimes people get multiple personalities drawing things out of other people. So it's an amazing thing. Our bodies are an amazing thing. Our minds are amazing. And this, this is our spirit. We're spirits having a human experience. And we have to learn that the spirit is inside the envelope, that this body is our tool. It's our clay pot. But we don't want the clay pot to get dirty. We don't want the clay pot to crack. We don't want the clay pot to get holes. So you have to treat it all as a process and find a process to do that. I'm in the process of doing a book called The Psychic Worm Stitch. And I'm going to put all this in there. And I also put in meditation, things like that. And on the website, and you can go to that website and go through. I will have stage 1 energy work. You'll be able to go to that and do that. It's in the works. But you'll be able to go and learn just the basic energy technique before you do anything, before you consider becoming a Reiki master, before you become a psychic, before you become a channeler or a medium, or or you're wanting to jump your being an empath, you're wanting to jump it into the next phase, or you're wanting to skip through the dimensions and reach to the walls and find other stuff beyond you. You know, I'm going to try and teach how to safely do those things in a reasonable manner. When things go wrong, it's because you've skipped a step, or you just are doing it and you have no protection. And then, you know, you go to the cemetery, bring back a dead boyfriend. You're in a house that something happened in, and the spirits know you can see them, and woof, 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 you know, and you're being haunted. You know, how do you turn it down so you don't see those things? How can you turn down something that's in your home scaring your children? How can you do those things? You learn those things. So the ability to do those, the skills to do those, the information is out there. You just have to be the student. And you also have to be aware, again, I'm going to say, if there is someone who can do these skills, if you start learning from them, and then they want you to follow them, and they want you to, you know, worship them and worship their ego and all that stuff, try not to fall into that. Try to always be like a street kid, be a street person, be street smart. And if you go into a place that's very haunted, make sure you've got your circle around you, working your aura clean, your brain sharp, because you don't know what's going to happen. Some people go into these things thinking it's like a lark, going into a haunted house, going to a haunting, and it's like Hill House. We're going to have some people from there pretty soon. I've watched videos of these ghost hunters irritating the ghosts and get snatched up. And then one of the members coming out going, well, why don't you do it to me? Oh my God, whoops. It's that still happening. He took off. You don't go in to hurt spirits, intimidate spirits. You know, what is your intent? If your intent is to cause trouble and chaos, that's what you're going to get. There will not be chaos on you. You may not be in control of it. If you go in with the intent of, I want to see an example of what's beyond us, what's outside of us, what's in that spirit world, what's in that soul that comes to us, that we build our spirit around, that we build our body around, that we build our life around. Each person is a book of information. And dead people, each dead person is a book of information. And as a psychic, as a medium, as a channeler, if you follow the right techniques to do it, you can investigate those things. You can learn those things. You have to find out what your talent is. No one can tell you what your talent's going to be. And if you can only reach a certain level, you can only reach a certain level. If you go beyond that and it's your dream, great. If it's not, you can turn it down so you don't have spirits standing by you 24/7 going, hey, hey, hey. Because if they know you can see them, they're going to talk to you. Or if they got a problem, you know, hey, I'm dead, I'm bored, you know, turn the TV on, you know, or I want a message to go to my mother, or, you know, you have to be able to differentiate what's happening and have the skills to do that. Now, anyone that wants to see me in person, I live in Pensacola, Florida, and I work out of a store called Live and Let Live, Metaphysical Store on Softly Field Road, Sal Pandolfo owns it, Matthew Ferguson works in it. They're both voodoo priests. And we have three readers, two ladies and myself, Terry O'Connor and Tony Talley and myself. And we all have different aspects that we bring to our tables. And each one is different and unique. And you come in and we hope that you go to the person that you're drawn to. And some people have different skills, different things. Since I've been through like the boot camp, the military of metaphysics, people come to me for different things. They go to Tony for, she does stone reading, she does numerology, she does has a wonderful way with working with women's issues. Terry does very good with talking to people about their issues and their problems in psychology, and I bring to the table what I've got, which is, I'm a psychic, I'm a medium, and I try to do everything to the best. I always, every day, I do a prayer to do justice to those I serve, so that, because to me, it's an honor to do these things. And it's not just something I'm doing because it's making me money or it's making me get attention or anything like that. I think if the work is good, everything follows that you need. But there's plenty of times I've had to step aside and people didn't have money and I've gone, you, here, sit down. I help people when I can help them. And you never know that next person coming up in front of you that you don't know. They can be smiling and laughing, and on the inside, they're considering suicide. They're considering, what am I going to do? I'm alone. I'm pregnant. Or my mother's dying. What am I going to do? Or my mother died, and I want to talk to her. Or I'm so lost, I need help. And you have to know how to deal with those things. You have to know how to deal with, and you get that skill from being a psychic, a medium, and a channeler. You look at the person, you scan their energy field, you look at their aura, and you understand what they need. And then you have to process it and give it to them in a way they can use it. And when you go to people like that, if after doing a reading and they keep going, oh, we'll come back, give me $300, blah, 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 keep going. Go to the person, your gut will tell you if it's right. If you begin to do metaphysical work, you'll know when it's right. The first feeling is the right feeling, the correct feeling. The first feeling in your gut, in your solar plexus, follow that. Become confident in yourself. When I was young, I was always taught I was stupid and didn't know anything I was doing. They were wrong. I know myself. Know yourself. Know what your work is. Know what your talent is. Don't overblow it. And don't overblow it. Don't go into ego. Approach it with arms open so that you can learn and then you can teach if that's what you want, or just to experience. It's up to you. But we're coming to the close, so tonight I'm going to thank Kate Hobson for doing all the electronics here. We did have a cattywampus Thursday thing going on where I got my phone call kind of went here and there. But when you're talking energy, it and goes to frequency, it always does something electronically. So I want to say to all of you out there, I hope that you learned something. I hope that you always study and always question. And I hope that you find a path and stick with it, and that you live your life to the best of your ability. And that's what I do. I'm the happiest I've ever been. I help people I help animals and people, and I'm doing something that I love that I couldn't imagine not being able to do what I do. So only do it out of love. And all you're going to get back is wonderful things. And so I hope that you enjoy your week. And next week, we are going to be talking to Jamie Mesley and about her haunted dolls, I believe, which I have a collection of those. And I love them. So everyone, thank you for listening. You don't know how much I appreciate it. And I want to wish everyone a good night. And just have a good one. So maybe talk to you all next week. Have a good one. See you then. And now I'm on my broom and going away. Good night, kids.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.